And I want to start with sort of the thing that's based most in science, which is Dr. Rappa talking about a neuropsychological exam. So that neuropsychological exam, as Dr. Rappa testified to, has multiple parts. And this is testing that the psychological and psychiatric community relies on routinely. And it allows us to have data about a person to explain how they are the way they are and why they are the way they are. This neuropsychological testing has multiple parts, and it includes something from Ronan. Dr. Rappa explained that. And in this particular testing, there was no reason to believe that there were any sort of validity issues with the information that she received. She also said that even though the testing was from just a couple months after January 28th, that doesn't matter because it still is a test of executive functioning. What that test has clinically elevated levels as it relates to inhibition and emotional regulation. And what Dr. Rappa told us is that that means, it explains this sort of persistent behavior that's not stopping, that becomes or has sort of a strong emotional reaction. He's not able to control that in the way another person might be. He also has a lack of inhibition. And that's why when he has consequences, that's not something that he's entirely understanding. She said that it's very hard for someone who tested like Ronan did to be in control of themselves, and they have a lack of insight into their own behaviors. She also explained that this testing, right, goes back to early childhood, and that's not really in dispute. The state's own expert, Dr. Wade Meyer, probably an attachment type of disorder from the time that he lived in an orphanage. Again, there's no dispute that the Ferriter's actions exacerbated that, right? Dr. Rappa told us that. That's something that the defense is completely conceding. But both Wade Myers and Dr. Rappa say that this it is from very early childhood neglect. And what we see and what the key is, and Dr. Rappa talked about this, Wade Myers had to concede to it, there are behaviors before 2018, right? That's when we're talking about the timeline, latch was put on his door in Arizona. So that has to be late 2018, early 2019. Prior to that time, Dr. Rappa testified about records that she reviewed from 2015, elementary school emails about ongoing and persistent behavior. And I asked her, because look, I understand, and the state made light of it, but you know, stealing sprinkles or activities that are just considered childhood behaviors. It's very hard to distinguish what constitutes regular childhood behavior and what constitutes a disorder. And I asked Dr. Rappa that during her direct examination. And what she said is that it is the persistence of these behaviors, that despite there being consequences, despite there being boundaries, they continue and continue and continue. In cross-examination, Ronan admitted in great deal to his own behaviors, right? He admitted to harming other people. He admitted to offering his brother beer as an experiment. Sev de Borzati testified that a time that they were visiting with knives in his backpack. And the cross-examination on that was, well, did he threaten you with a knife? Did he use a knife? An 11-year-old shouldn't have knives in their backpack. Right? That's everyone's common sense. That as a young child, there are certain things, certain boundaries that you cannot cross because you're a kid. Stealing from his own home, stealing from the parents of some of his friends, He admits to running away. He admitted to breaking into his tablet at his last school in Arizona and searching violent terms that concerned his parents, and that was the reason why he had to get his technology taken away. Kellen McCoy about an incident that he had with his sister. And in cross-examination, the state was asking Dr. Rappa about these sort of specific incidents, trying to minimize them or showing that, you know, any one act is.
As we approach the top of the hour, I want to thank Lateef Gray for joining us this hour with all of his expertise. Always glad that Michael Ayala joins me next. Also, do not worry. We always hit the pause button because we do not want you to miss a moment of these closing arguments. We still have the state's rebuttal as well. Court TV, your front row seat. Welcome back to Court TV Live. I'm Ashley Wilcott.
And I'm Michael Ayala. We're both here today giving you your front row seat to justice. Well, the jury has been listening to closing arguments in the Boy in a Box trial. The defense rested after defendant Timothy Ferriter said that he would not be taking the stand.
Has your client made a decision in this case as to whether he will testify in his own behalf or not?
He has made a decision, Your Honor.
And what is that decision?
He will not be testifying.
Have you made a decision in this case whether to testify in your own behalf?
I have.
All right, and what is that decision, Mr. Ferriter?
To not testify.
All right. Based on the court's colloquy of Mr. Ferriter, sir, I find that you're making the decision knowingly and intelligently after having had the opportunity to receive the advice and counsel of your attorney. I also find that I've explained to you the potential risk and consequences of testifying in your own behalf on the stand, including the fact that you would subject yourself to cross-examination. Based on all that, I find that you're also entering into this decision with an appreciation of those risks and consequences, and that you understand the same, and that your decision is being made freely and voluntarily. So I accept your decision not to testify as having been knowingly and intelligently, freely and voluntarily made by you. So that concludes the colloquy on this matter. Sir, you may give your attorney back to Mike, and thank you, sir.
Remember, Ferriter now faces up to 40 years in prison if he's convicted on charges of aggravated child abuse, false imprisonment, and child neglect. Remember, he turned down a plea deal of 2 years. I'm not sure, Michael, if that was a good strategy or not, but clearly his decision.
Gosh, you're not just talking about 2 years, you're talking about 2 years in prison.
Yeah.
So I can understand him being reluctant, but he's facing a lot of time here.
Yes.
And I'm not sure he has a good case. All right. Now, we've hit the pause button, so you haven't missed a moment of court. We're going to pick it up where we left off in the defense's closing argument.
That a child does out of being a kid or immaturity is never a big deal. But it's when it continues and doesn't stop over and over and over again, and when it escalates and when it becomes persistent, and when in this case you have a neuropsychological exam that supports that it becomes a disorder and something that is problematic to the child, to the parents, and to everybody that he's around. So Kellen McCoy entered his sister's classroom, had her stand up, and humiliated her in front of the entire class. And during cross-examination, I recall Ms. Coakley saying something to Dr. Rappa, and Dr. Rappa was like, no, but it seems small, but that's not the case. And Ms. Coakley interrupted her at that time. But you have to think about the steps it takes, right? To decide to go to an entirely different part of the school. Pretend to be another person. Decide to point out your sister. Go to that classroom. Have the courage to come up with this entire story. That is something that gets to the level of being manipulative. And those are the concerns about his life. And that's corroborated per Dr. Rappa prior to 2018 through records that she reviewed, through, I think she listed off 25 items or 26 items that she reviewed in coming to her opinion. Dr. Rappa also testified how when you have a lack of trust in a parent-child relationship, and I guess you can rely on your common sense for this, but when you have a kid, right, and they're growing up, you rely on trust. But we rely on that in any relationship that we have, that what we see is what we get, right? That what we expect when someone says, I'm going to do this or I'm not going to do this, that they actually follow through with that. And that relationship of trust is really important between a parent and a child. And when it is broken, Dr. Rappa said that the response that a parent has, the natural response, is to control. Right? And we see that in our everyday lives. If you have a kid who's out, joyriding, you don't get the car. Right? If you are someone who is fighting at school, you're going to be in a timeout. You see in this case that it is taken to an extreme, but it is also in response to an extreme, because that kid joyriding who doesn't get their car stops. Most people's children stop when they say, you can't do this anymore. I'm going to take away your items. I'm going to put you in a timeout for a reasonable amount of time. I'm going to ask that you stop doing it. I'm going to ask that you not, hurt people at school. I keep getting emails from school about how your violence is becoming a problem. I need you to stop doing that. Eventually, kids stop. It persisted over and over and over again for years. I want to show you a video of how Tim Ferriter
and you want to run away, see how that takes you. I'm not chasing you this time. See how it goes. If you want, should I put this ankle thing back on you? Because I kind of need to know where you're at, just so you don't, hurt yourself. What's out there? You think you do. All 14-year-olds, 15-year-olds, these kids you're around, you might think you know what's going on in the world, but you don't quite know. Give it a try. Go ahead. But I got to put the ankle bracelet on you. Because I'm responsible. And when I say I'm not giving up, I'm not quitting, you got me forever. So deal with that. Destroy this shit. I'm not going through this again and again and again. Deal with NOLA to the next step.
You can hear Tim Ferriter, as Rappa said, in the worst tone ever sometimes, attempting to parent, right? And it is not perfect. I don't think any parents, would say that their parenting is perfect or even great in retrospect. But what he's telling him is, if you keep running away, I'm going to have to put a monitor on you. And of course, that sounds like an extreme thing to do. But what he tells him is, you're 14 years old. You don't know what's out there in the world. I have to keep you safe.